The n8n interface is God's gift to men. If you've ever found yourself on the n8n interface and looking around and thinking, wait, what the hell do I even like? Where do I go to add a workflow? Where do I go to find the documentation? What do I do when I'm trying to do this and that? You're in the right place. So in this lesson, I guess I'm calling it, we're going to be looking at the n8n interface. We're going to be learning about all the tools in n8n. So, by the way, for context, the name is Muzi. I am the Grand Alchemist of the Guild. You don't know what that is. That's okay. If you do, then that's even better. It's nice to meet you, and I would love to just walk you through this. So, my mission is to help 1,000 people make $1,000 online using AI and automation, and that's why I'm making these videos, and that's why I am trying to help you get started as quickly as you possibly can. So that's basically just what we're going to do. Let me stop yapping and let me just start taking you through this. So the interface is pretty incredible. Let me just sort of set that up right now as we speak. The interface is pretty incredible, and this is just because of how well designed it was. See, if you've been following along, then you understand that yes, n8n is an open source project, and most open source projects, like, they kind of lack that finesse, they lack that quality, because there isn't any investor backed funding, or like anyone, you know sort of like just cash just flowing through the project. Um, but I think with n8n it's slightly different. It's because it's being built by the community. That's like it's funneling this taste. Like everyone just has this taste that's making it very, very good. It's intuitive, it's visually engaging, and everything makes sense. It's just like the same colors that makes sense. So yeah, it was designed for beginners and technical people in mind. So like if you're an experienced professional in any capacity, then NNN is for you. And there are many elements that make up the interface, but we're going to be looking at all of them right now. And if you master them all, then you will be able to navigate with no problems. You'll be able to build and scale whatever you're building easily. So let's just go through it right now. We're going to start with the overview. The overview is this page, right? It's got all the workflows, credentials, and executions you have access to. We're going to start on the right-hand panel over here. This is the n8n logo. This is a button that you can click on, and from here you can start a new workflow or add a new credential. And there are some enterprise options, of course. This is the home page that you click on, and it will open the overview again. Here you can find templates, and it'll open a window on a new tab. Here you can find variables. These are environments variables that you can set. So maybe if you want to save some API key or save some kind of website or something, you can set all of those over here. Here is the help, and if you it's a drop down, so if you click it, it'll open up all these different sections, the quick start guides and the documentation pages themselves. Like as I said in a previous video, you should probably go check those out because they're packed full of information, which is again perfect for beginners and technical people and anyone in between. So it's the forum as well, which is the n8n community. It's very, very crucial to get involved, because those people, they're crushing it right now, and they know that just how powerful n8n is, and it's just like a community of people who want to help each other and who want to make the product better. So yeah, there's also the n8n course, and again it's video and text course, so you can go check those out if you want to, because it's very good and very extensive, um, whichever way you want to consume the course content, which is like really, really great. Here you can report a bug, so you can send a message to the n8n developers themselves, and they'll probably get back to you like within, a bit of time. And here it's just about n8n, and again, this is all just information you can find here. Here you get the updates for like, because whenever there's like new updates, you can just update your own instance of n8n. I'm running my own instance on my website here, and you can do something similar. Here is my settings, my profile settings. So I could go to settings, or I could just sign out. Let's look at the main page here. So this is the title, as you might imagine. This is the button. Again, if you click on here, you could create a new workflow. There's a drop down where you could create a credential. right? Very useful. And again, these are all the workflows that you've previously built. Um, and then these are the workflows you have, these are the credentials you have, and these are the executions that you have. Let's check out the credentials. So again, when you create a credential, it's about the like it's very easy to do it. You'll just be taken here, and then you have to add the credential information, and it'll just exist here, and you can use it in your workflows. And here is the executions page where it just shows you a bunch of executions that you've done recently. And you could load more. You could check out any failed ones. You could navigate to that workflow that failed and just check out what actually went wrong. So yeah, that is the overview page. You find a ton of information about what is going on, and you could like it's the one place that you'll probably see a lot because it's the page that actually loads. It's the home page. So let's look at the workflow canvas. The workflow canvas is the whenever you open up a workflow, this is like the part that actually pops up. Let me come here and unpin this. I've said this before, but it's kind of a bad idea to pin data because and just because like when you if you forget about it, you just keep sending the same data over and over. I've said that before, and I'm saying it now. So what you might notice is that this sidebar kind of came with us, which is great. We don't need to go through that again, but this is the workflow canvas, so you could zoom out here, you could zoom in. There are also buttons that help you do the exact same thing, and this is just the button that helps you sort of see everything, at the same time. And there's this undo button here, which allows you to do some really interesting stuff. So here is the title of the workflow. You can add tags, and tags are useful for searching purposes. So if you want to search through workflows, maybe you are working on a project, right? And you have these different workflows and sub workflows that come together to create a whole system. You could tag them all under the same project, and then when you're searching through them in the in the main page, then they come up very easily. So here's the active and inactive button. So if you click on this, you'll be able to activate your workflow so that it runs in the background. If your workflow has like some trigger like this, or has like a schedule trigger or any type of trigger, instead of a manual one, then it might be useful to keep them active or to at least activate them in some way from like externally, maybe if you're using some kind of webhook or something like that. So here's the share button where you can share your workflow with other people. The save button where you can save. Again, saving is very important. There are also ways to instantiate different versions of your workflow that have been previously saved, which is very useful in case you make a mistake and you just don't know, like, you feel the need to go back to a previous version. And then this is so the three dots are the workflow sort of the most interesting part of the workflow, like you might think. Um, you could duplicate this workflow. So what it does is it creates a new workflow with the same name, just kind of changed slightly, and then you could just keep working from that point onwards. You could download the workflow, and what that does is it downloads a file that is a JSON file for this. And what you could do is you could import it again from file. So you could import it, you could send it to someone and then have that person import it in their system and they'll get the exact same thing. You could import from URL. So if there's a URL that is publicly accessible and on that URL is a file that is the JSON file, you could just import the JSON file in here and that will be, your workflow just imported just like that. And there are of course like much more interesting settings. We'll check those out later on, but there's also this delete button which you can use to delete the workflow entirely. So yeah, and then this button is the button for the nodes, the integrations that you can put into your workflow. So it's very, very useful. And when you hover over it, you'll start seeing this other button, which is for adding a sticky note. Sticky note, I feel, is one of the most useful you know pieces that you can just put on because it allows you to um, give yourself ways to understand whatever is happening. And not only just for you, but in case you want to send it to other people, in case you want to share your workflows, adding sticky notes and just like telling people, hey, this is what's happening here, this is what's happening here. It helps them understand it. Like get off the ground running as quickly as possible. So yeah, this is basically just the best way to document your workflows. Let's come back here and just keep going. So as I said, the little button on the right hand side, it's the button that allows you to see the nodes, the integrations, and it's called the node library or the node panel. Let's check it out. So how how you do it is you just click on this, but you could also click on the tab button on your um, computer. You just click on this and it will show you all these different types. So there are many types of nodes in n8n, right? It's built-in nodes, it's custom nodes, it's it's action nodes, trigger nodes, and so on and so forth. But um, you'll find them all in here. So when you're starting to build, what you want to do is you want to add a trigger node, and that's what we did here. There's all sorts of triggers. You can add another trigger, but yeah, there's a manual trigger, an app event trigger, a schedule trigger, and so on and so forth. Um, um, yeah, all those are very useful. There are AI sort of nodes that you can add in. And again, there's AI templates that you can go check out where you can just put them in. There's AI agents, which is a type of complex kind of node that is its own kind of like internal workflow when you think about it. It allows you to connect to tools and do some really interesting stuff with AI, um, like running everything for you. There's the OpenAI integrations, which is a very like is a favorite of a lot of people as a type of basic LLM training, which is just sending messages to models. Very simple. What people will normally use is like text classification when maybe in the case of an email coming in and you want to classify the text in there so that you could label the email and figure out whether or not you need to send an automatic reply. Those types of automations are very useful. Sentiment analysis is also useful when you're trying to look at sort of someone's post on social media or they post on your website, like a review on your website, and you're just trying to see what sentiments they have, like how they felt about maybe a product that you posted or maybe some ideas that you're sharing. There's a ton of all of these things like information extraction, summarization chains. All of those are very useful and all of those are available. And again, as I spoke about before, there's something called an action node, which is basically a node that does things. It connects to services and it does things like using those services. And there's a bunch of them here. All of these are integrations, right? And they alphabetically categorize all for you to just check out. Yeah, Go Eye Level, very famous. LinkedIn, very famous. Mailjet, very famous. I've used MailJet before. It's very useful for sending bulk emails. So yeah, just check that out. Not sponsored, by the way, at least not yet. Um, Miro, very famous. You can send an HTTP request to Miro. You can start changing things up on your Miro boards. Monday.com, very famous and very useful as well, for project management. NPM, very useful, because NPM is the node package manager. Notion is very useful if you're like trying to automate setting up Notion boards for your people in your workplace and so on and so forth. And again, like all of these are very useful. You could even send requests to PayPal for like maybe hypothetically you want to invoice someone. You can do that, and like you can automate invoicing, which is very powerful. So there are these built-in nodes that do things without credentials. So a credential is basically a secure way of connecting with a service online. And built-in nodes, they don't need you to set up credentials to use them. Like this if node is a built-in node. And when you click into it, you'll tell that it's a built-in node because it doesn't have that thing that's telling you to set up a credential. Unlike this Gmail node that has the credential to connect with over here. So it just does something specific. It transforms data, it processes data, it does some logic. Those are, the built-in nodes. So yeah, there's the code node, date and time, there's filters, there's aggregates, compression, all sorts. The crypto, what it does is it can create different hashes based on different algorithms, And this is very useful when you're trying to create values. Maybe like hypothetically, you want to create a unique value that represents someone. Then you just hash their name and create that value, and you use that value as like their ID in a system or something. These file conversion ones are also useful. Say hypothetically, you want to convert um, anything to JSON, you want to convert anything to a text file, you want to convert anything to XLS, you want to convert a base64 string to a file, you want to convert a file to a base64 string. All of these are very useful. One of the ones you might find yourself using often is the split out and aggregate, and the merge as well, because the merge is very useful for if you have multiple data streams. Like here we have two data streams to an extent, because we could have things going to the true branch, but we could also have things going through the false branch. And if ever they meet at some other point, like if ever we want to combine these to just have a larger data set to work with in a future flow, then we would use a merge node here and just merge those two flows together in a way that would allow us to like access every piece of data perfectly. So there's tons of things. Rename keys, right? Again, keys are the because if you understand data structures, then you understand that data flows in terms of lists of objects or lists of items. Items have keys and values, right? Key value pairs. So you can rename a key in an object that's flowing through, which is so powerful when you think about it. And you can also like sort. You can do markdown transformations. There's like a ton of these, but yeah. And again, there's flow control ones like the if and the switch and the filters and everything. There are core nodes like the HTTP request. Again, this is the code and the HTTP requests are probably the most useful nodes in n8n, I feel, because HTTP request allows you to send requests to sort of integrations that you don't have access to natively in n8n. So like anything that like say hypothetically, if n8n doesn't have a native integration, like if it didn't have the native integration for Gmail, you might have to send an HTTP request using your client ID and your client secret, just as a part of the request itself, as a part of the I think it's the query, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, like it's very powerful. You could even handle like you could even handle events that are happening inside and then inside your n8n, like you have an n8n node, which is so insane when you think about it. It's like the levels of loops, I guess you could say. And of course, there are ways to put yourself in as well. You have methods of like sending messages and waiting for responses. Um, Very powerful, very extensive, and very useful. All of it. So let's look at the next thing that's probably very very useful for you, and it's the execution logs. So the execution logs are it's everything. So hypothetically, you set up a workflow and you have it running active, right? You don't want to check it out like every single day. You want to just leave it there. But what you do want to see, if ever it errors, you want to see where it went wrong. So how you go through that is this is the editor. Right? This allows you to edit, to move things, and do really cool stuff. But this is the executions. So when you come in here, what you'll see is the executions that you've done previously. You see the actual workflow that you were working on here, and it will show you everything that you did previously. The most interesting thing you could do here is you could go into one of these executions. Say hypothetically you have an error, you have one that errored before. What you could do is you could drag it into the editor so that you could understand what went wrong. So you could debug this in the editor. You could bring the data in, and what it'll do is it'll pin the data here. So it'll tell you this data is pinned, and the thing about pinned data is that you have to understand pinned data. It's very useful for testing purposes. You could edit this pinned data by clicking on this pen button, I guess you could say, and this is the pinned data now. So you could add this data, whatever. Um, And this is useful for, again, testing. So you could just test different sort of ways that you could have, maybe if you had different values flowing through your workflow, you could test for those values, which again is very useful. So after doing any kind of changes to the data, you'll save it and then you'll check out like where things went wrong over here. So it even saves the error message, which is very useful. What you'll notice is that this was a type conversion error, so it was having a different time converting this variable that we were mapping from the previous section. I like to look at the inputs in terms of JSON just to see everything, because and it shows you really nicely how it's a list. So lists are delineated by the square brackets, and the curly brackets are the objects or the items, I guess you could say. So it's a list of items, and there's 6 items inside. um, what you'll notice is that the contactor was coming in either as a boolean true or false, or it was coming in as an empty string. It's having a really different time converting the empty string, but we managed to solve that by hitting this convert types were required. So yeah, the execution logs are perfect for seeing where things could go wrong, where things went right, and also like just working out how to solve things. It's very useful. So let's move on. The settings panel. So as I said before, there are settings. When you go and click on these three dots, you'll see these duplicate. So this is for duplicating, this is for downloading, and this is for importing. But the settings are probably one of the most useful parts. What you can do here is you can set up different ways that your workflow is supposed to actually work. So let's just run through these parts first before I actually talk about this. So here you can set your time zone. Time zone is very useful when you're using like schedule triggers like the cron node. Um, Depending on your time zone, you're going to be running at certain times, right? As you can imagine. And you don't want to be running your workflow at the wrong time, because like say hypothetically you're trying to create and post a video at a certain time where you know your target audience is like active on social media. You only want to do it at those times, so that's why time zone is very useful. Save failed production executions. Again, this is for the executions tab that we just looked at, and if you set this as save, then it's going to save, but if you set it as don't save, then it's not going to save. And again, this is also the same. It's like save successful production execution, save manual execution, save execution progress. Um, you have a lot of control here, which it allows you to do some really interesting things to set up your system in really interesting ways. Um, and then you can time out your workflow here, which is very interesting. So it has these buttons that actually tell you what's going on. So um, this is whether to cancel a workflow execution after a defined time, which is very interesting. So if you click on this, it'll actually give you the options of so say hypothetically you just don't like, your workflow is prone to errors and you just don't want it to be running for way too long. You could just set that up here and say, hey, don't run for like more than 10 minutes, because if you run for more than 10 minutes, then I'll know there's something wrong and I'll just switch it up. But again, you don't have to deal with this over here. You can deal with this in your workflow itself, by having different sections that check for different sort of like execution points. So this is still very useful though if you just want to have like an overarching thing that checks. So here, the error workflow, this is something we're going to cover in the future, but the error workflow is a workflow that triggers whenever you have an error in this workflow. So it's a workflow that's constantly watching like whatever workflow you're working on here. And it's very useful for like error logging and so on and so forth. If you just want to have like a way of just like setting up a system for logging any errors that might occur so that you handle them immediately. So a simple way of you doing something like error logging is have a workflow that you're working on, have an error workflow that catches any errors, send those errors to like a database like Airtable, send yourself a message after sending those errors to Airtable so that you can check out the error. So after getting that email, you'll be able to know, oh, okay, there was an error and it's this type of error. I should probably fix that immediately. So you come and you work on the workflow, right? That's basically just how it works. And again, the execution order is basically something that is set up by the system. There's V1 and V0. There's two options. Just use the recommended one. That's how I do it, and I think that's how most people do it as well. But yeah, you could just, depending on however you're setting up the system, depending on what kind of like settings you want, you could pick V0. Again, check out the documentation of like what that actually means. And yeah. Okay, so there's the side panel again. So the side panel links, we've went through them, so we're not going to go through them again. Probably the most useful part is this help sort of drop down, and it has a ton of links to a ton of really useful places. Go check those out, and you'll be on the right track. So now you should have all the right tools in the right places. You should be able to win, right? Because understand that we are in a gold rush right now. AI and automation is big, and you don't want to be those guys who, say hypothetically, you do want to be those guys who are just digging for the gold. I feel like there really is no point. I'd rather sell the shovels. What tools do I need to sell the shovels? Well, I need ways to get a lot of shovels, right? That's just my game. That's the game I'm playing, and that's the game you could be playing too. Um, but the game is just beginning, and I get that, and I hope you get it too, because soon we'll be diving deeper into the blue. We'll be diving into data, how it flows in n8n, how you can start thinking about what it actually means to understand data. So I'll see you then, fellow welcomers.